Hello everybody, welcome back to Throttle Grotto and welcome back to the E30 project. Today, I'm getting closer to having the list of stuff to do on the E30 done so that we can get this car back on the road and go enjoy it come spring. Still not getting out and enjoying cars weather here in the Northwest, unfortunately. Let's take a look at the list of things that we've gotten done so far and what's left to do. Our list: filled the transmission. All these things are done, so we still need to check the rear diff, the fluid in the rear diff, to make sure that it's full. We need to flush the brakes, which will be actually part of the brake pads and hoses job up here. I need to do an ozone generator in the interior of the car, which can be done really at any time. I need to get seat parts because these seats are chewed up. You guys know of anybody that has some sport seats that has parts available? Yeah, see that, or I'm gonna have to get an upholstery kit. Get a duplicate key. I haven't done that yet. Valve adjust, that's a big one. This has not been done probably in many years, which hopefully is a pretty easy job. It looks like it's fairly easy to get to. I do have a new valve cover gasket just for that job. And like I said before, brake pads, hoses, check the transmission fluid, valve cover gasket, which is part of the valve adjust. I need to glue the cover back on the airflow meter. It keeps popping off. Fill up the radiator with juice, find some grill clips, do the rack boots and the tie rods, which will be another sizable job, just getting all that out and back in the car. And then I need to do the hood alignment, and then we're ready to go with this thing. So let's knock a big job off the list today. Let's do the valve adjust and get the valve cover gasket replaced, since we already have those parts. I'm still waiting on parts for the brakes. I for some reason didn't order rotors. I got pads over there next to the fluids, and the fluids down here. Pads are, I thought about just having these turned, but there's a pretty good lip on here already. So I'm just going to replace the rotors. They're cheap enough. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you choose to look at that. So I need to move all of these hoses out of the way. I need to take this breather off, move this breather, take this plug or the bolt out so I can release that. Do all of the plugs and wires that I've already put back in. And this bracket comes off out of the way, and then the valve cover should just lift off and let us have access to the valve train. And with the plugs and wires out of the way, it should turn over by hand pretty easily, which makes that part of the job a lot easier to do. Now, with the hardware out of the way, and most everything out of the way, we can loosen this up and remove it, hopefully. Yeah, just slips right out of there, right? There we go. Ideally without breaking anything, which is great. Well, you can see the inside of the valve cover actually looks pretty good for 200,000 miles or so, like 335K. That looks pretty good. Actually, inside of this engine looks really nice. There's a really nice clean engine inside. So now we have to go through the procedure of adjusting all these valves. So we get to do it on each cylinder. So then we have to rotate the engine so that we can adjust all of the valves on each cylinder. So exhaust intake all the way down, and we just rotate And the procedure that I read was that we loosen the bolt on the side and then go in with an Allen wrench to adjust, and we set the gap to, let's see here, probably can't read it, but it says 0.254 millimeter or 10 thousandths, and that just slips between there. So this kind of seems like some of these are a little tight, probably some are a little loose. So we have to go through, some might be open, some might be closed. Kind of surprised this gasket is not breaking as I'm going to take it off. Like, it's clearly been replaced at some point. So I don't know if someone came in here and did a valve adjustment. It's one of the mysteries of this car is, like, it seems like someone did some maintenance on it, but then it sat and never got driven. So, like, I would have expected this valve cover gasket to come off in at least 100 pieces, but it came off in one. But I am pretty happy to see everything is clean and pretty nice in here. The way that I'm going to do this, you may choose to do it differently, but I am going to go through and do the valves that have the cam at the bottom of the eccentric. So like this cam here, this lobe is pointing straight down. So this one is loose on the cam, which means that I can adjust it. You can, I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of hard to get light and all that stuff in here. All right, so hopefully with the flashlight in here, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. This cam lobe, or the rocker, is running loose on there, which tells me that this cam is pointing down and not influencing the valve being open at all. So I'm going to do the valve adjustment on this one, and I'll mark it with a Sharpie, and then go through and do them all that way, so I don't have to like start at one end and run my way down to figure out which ones are open and which ones are closed. I can just do them as I go along. So the procedure is loosen this 10 millimeter nut here, and then we take, you can use a piece of wire, you can use an Allen wrench. This is like a 3 millimeter Allen wrench, and it goes in here, and then you adjust, like this is an oval shaped cam on the top here. So you adjust it, set your gap with your feeler gauge through here. And like right now, the feeler gauge is tight. It doesn't fit in here very easily. So it should have just a little bit of resistance going in and out of there, and it does not. So I'm going to loosen that up, set the gap, and then tighten the 10 millimeter nut, and then that one should be adjusted. Then I mark it and move to the rest. Okay, so one thing to take into account too is that you're going to have a little bit of movement when you have that gap set correctly. It's not going to be perfectly tight. So if it's perfectly tight, either your valve is open or you didn't set it properly. The thickness of the feeler gauge, I don't know if you can see that, is going to tell you how much movement you have. And don't guesstimate it by the movement at the cam, as where it counts is at the top of the valves. So Make sure you have that end right, and this one will be right by default. So I'm going to do the rest of these, and then this job will be done. Now that we've got all of our valves set, let's see here. Yeah, all our valves are set and marked. We can go ahead and put all this back together, and then we'll start it up and listen to it run. I also remembered that I still have to swap out the plug wires and the cap. This is still the original plug wires and cap. It should run okay with that stuff on there for now. All right, everything is back together. Cleaned up the valve cover a little bit of the wire wheel just to kind of make it look newer. Hooked all this stuff back up. I'm wondering if the cold start valve is working. It does not seem to be starting easily on the first hit of the key, but I'll give this a shot, see how it sounds. Well, it sounds like I got a vacuum leak somewhere is what it sounds like. Yeah, that idle's not happy. Well, as you can see in the shop here, it is running really rich, which means something in this adjustment is off. But once it warmed up, it settled down. So it acts just like that thing over there, the 928, where it idles funny till it warms up. But like right now, it is at a solid 1050 or whatever it's supposed to be. We're gonna have to do a little more homework. Okay, so good news is I did have a vacuum leak. It was the intake boot where all this vacuum line stuff, this big diameter vacuum line stuff, goes into the intake boot. There was a crack on the bottom side of it that I thought that I glued together. I didn't. So I packed it full of silicone, put a worm drive clamp on it instead of a big zip tie, and that sealed it right up. So let's give this thing a run and see how it is now. I did reach out to some people that are more knowledgeable in M20s than I am. Apparently they are a little clackety or whatever. There is a little more lifter noise than what I'm used to. So I'm going to trust that I did the adjustments right and see how it is now that the vacuum leak's sorted. Let's give this thing a start and see how it goes. Well, already that sounds a ton better. I'll give it a minute here and see if there's any hunting or surging. I got a fan going in here today too because I think it is still running rich. Well, there we go again. There we go again. But actually only a couple of surges this time. It's still a little... So that's not too bad. I'm happy with that. That actually could have been that auxiliary air slide. This little guy down here is really problematic on these cars, but this one seems to be working. So I think a lot of people delete those, and that might be something that we do down the road. Okay, I'm going to call this a victory. I found a few hose clamps that I'm going to have to replace because they're not doing a good enough job of keeping the hose from leaking. A few other small things like that. But that means I get to cross the valve cover gasket and the valve adjust off my list, which means I'm getting much, much closer to actually being able to take this car for a test drive. So a lot more things to do, but also take some time to enjoy the holidays. Slow progress is still progress. So that's all from Throttle Grotto. Until next time, get out there and work on something.